code available on their website. Post any announcements, they have it on their website and keep those documents in archive. Now, in terms of the policymaker, we think that there are something that the policymakers can do as well to really enhance the good corporate governance. Given the fact that a lot of principles are voluntary, not mandatory, it seems like we need to do something to change the hearts of those individuals, heart and mind of individuals that who run the companies. So in the sense that we suggest that there should be more workshops and conferences, a training program, there should be certificate program on corporate governance, and there should be research grants perhaps to provide evidence, that provides the evidence to the company managers that indeed good corporate governance is good for the company, is not just compliance to the rules. So in this regard, we think that we have a long way to go, but there are clear paths toward the success if we truly believe the corporate governance is important. Now, we're going to do one way to promote the corporate governance is basically we try to give the awards to those who get a high score, and we're going to, by the end of the conference today, we're going to announce the 5 winners of the Corporate Governance Excellence Award. And we will provide the information that we have regarding our assessments on our website. So we'll try to practice what we preach, be more transparent, and have the disclosure to the stakeholders, that those who want to know what we're doing, how we're doing, and curious about the results, they can actually reach out and get some information they want. And what we are doing, what we're planning to do for next year, we're going to assess again all company listed on Tadawun, and we're going to make the assessment based on the new CMA, CGI, corporate governance principles, and again, we're going to keep our existing 2 sub-indices and have our basic index as well, but with more variable. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Najati. We are back on time, alhamdulillah. And to emphasize the issue of knowledge and education in the area of corporate governance, we in the College of Business, we created, in fact, established a course of corporate governance. It was offered for the first time this fall. I don't know if any other university in the kingdom are offering that. It attracted 40 students in the first semester. Currently, it has 48 students, and you cannot get into that course without taking a full year of accounting, accounting 1 and accounting 2, and principles of finance, and business ethics as well. So you will know exactly what you are talking about when you go to the assessment. Now we move on to our next segment, and our keynote speaker with us here from Harvard, Dr. Stephen Davis. There's a lot I can say about Dr. Stephen. But let me just say briefly here, he has باع طويل في الحوكمة, has a long experience in corporate governance, has been called on by many other places. He was in Egypt, I believe, 2 months ago, doing similar things. He just came from Paris, as a matter of fact, perhaps doing something like that. But let me mention that he is associate director of the Harvard Law School programs on corporate governance and institutional investors, and a senior fellow at the program on corporate governance. I will be satisfied with this, and let me call on Dr. Stephen here, and you will hear from him about how important corporate governance is becoming around the globe, not just in developing countries. It's also important in developed countries as well. And with that, welcome Dr. Steve.
Thank you, Dr. Bajes, and thank you, Al Faisal University, for inviting me, for also putting together this very important program and very important tool of use for the capital market. My comments today are, as Dr. Bajes indicated, meant to really talk about the global impact of corporate governance and the use of indices such as those that are being developed by the team that we've just heard about. So let's start with this question about why corporate governance indices exist. And, well, I guess we don't know. What did I do wrong? Okay, brilliant, thank you. One of the main reasons that we look to is investors look to corporate governance indices as a kind of an early warning system. It gives them an insight when they see the scores a company gets about whether this is a company that is high risk or low risk, and it's something that investors use in all sorts of ways. And I'm going to give you some exact examples of that in just one moment. Another reason, of course, as we know, is for lots of stakeholders to see whether companies are actually complying with the law, with corporate governance rules, and all the legal regulations that companies have to do. So an index will give you a sense of that. Another reason for an index is to draw capital to a market. We've seen cases of countries and stock exchanges that feel that this is one way to do it, to sort of profile corporate governance and make sure that companies who may actually be practicing good corporate governance, but people don't know it. So an index is a way to sort of expose that. And then finally, it is all about lowering the cost of capital for companies. That is a critical factor that companies, from all the research, it seems to show that if companies do better on corporate governance, they have easier and cheaper access to capital. And overall, if you had to think about what unites all these points, it's really about the whole idea of corporate governance is about trust, and it's about sustainability. So even though we would then go on to another question, which is what's in it for companies? Why should companies be interested in corporate governance? It is really, of course, it's about compliance. We know that. But it's way beyond compliance at this point. It is really about good governance being a kind of an indicator of trust, and it's an indicator of sustainability. So all the various players that may be looking at companies, they are doing so because they want to have a sense as to whether this is a trustworthy company, which translates into risk, and is it a company that has the potential for sustainability over time. So I'll just give you a couple of real-world examples of how this plays out in how companies find benefits in corporate governance. And I'll do it from a variety of different markets. So one is Unilever. Obviously, it's a brand that lots of people know very well. Unilever has stood out for being a company that really takes corporate governance very seriously, not purely for compliance, but as a way of building goodwill among all the different stakeholders that Unilever faces. And this is something that they've been able to bank. They sort of bank this goodwill. In effect, they have turned corporate governance into an asset for the company. And the way it played out was a couple of years ago when another large US company called Kraft tried to take over Unilever, and Unilever resisted that. Unilever was able to call upon the goodwill that it had invested with shareholders over many years, particularly because of its good corporate governance, and Unilever was able to deflect that takeover effort, which was a $143 billion takeover effort, but Unilever was able to keep its independence. And largely, you'd have to say it was because of the way it had built trust with all the stakeholders, particularly, of course, its investors, over time. Think about another case, Marks and Spencer, the UK retailer. There was, and this is a very different kind of story, but some of you may remember a building collapse, a tragedy in Bangladesh that happened in 2013 at Rana Plaza, where more than 1,000 people were killed. Marks and Spencer avoided being involved in that disaster. And the reason is because it had a sophisticated risk system in place, supervised by the board, that was aware that in Bangladesh there is a particular risk involved with multi-story buildings because of corruption and health and safety standards and such. So Marks and Spencer had a rule. They would not source from any company in Bangladesh that worked in a multi-story building. And they